respective listeners and viewers. We are back. I guess it's like part two of picking up our kind of where did health disparities start? And how did we get here? As a part of our Shattering the Veil series around white supremacy in healthcare. So we're really just gonna, kind of pick up. I guess I should say, I can't talk much right now. I don't know why. I'm Martina, and this is
Seth.
yes. All right, you guys. So we're really just gonna jump back into the timeline, but we wanted to kind of back up a little bit and go back to the mid 1800s with a very horrible man who was considered the father of modern gynecology, James Marion Sims. Okay, I spoke a little bit about him in the previous video or last week's video, if you got a chance to see that one, because we were going through kind of timeline of just white supremacy or disparities across African Americans in the United States. And of course, Sims is a big part of those disparities. And, simply put, he would do gynecological experiments on Black women, Black slaves, without any sort of anesthesia. And he ended up being able to perfect a lot of methods that are still used today. And because he is considered father of modern gynecology, a lot of methods that are still used today, he inflicted a lot of that pain on Black women who did not have their consent. And so we're going to spend some time talking about that and how he's a horrible person. So Lisette, you can jump in. Mm-hmm.
I like how you just like jump in.
Yes.
No, I think one of the things I'll kind of preface before I kind of dig into uh this man. I don't even want to like talk about him
Yes,
as the father of anything.
he's not.
Uh, I think one of the things that in the future, I think what we might be able to get into is, um, you know, the beginning of health disparities from other perspectives. I know we mentioned, looking at especially like Native American,
Mm-hmm.
and others. So definitely something to keep an eye out in the future. I think we'll continue exploring some other perspectives, as we look at the different health disparities and where they all kind of began, but also where they merge. I
Yeah.
think a lot of times uh, we got to learn each other's histories to know that a lot of the same thinking, the same practices, the same ugliness has happened in a lot of our uh, you know Asians and Latinos and
Mm-hmm.
Native Americans. I know Native Americans is one that Martina and I want to explore more and have that. So definitely
Absolutely.
uh, something to just keep in mind as we kind of continue digging into the history and sort of where it kind of started with African Americans and sort of those health disparities that we still see today,
Mm-hmm.
and how they've impacted me, like my healthcare as well as a Latina, and how those kind of same thinkings. But one of the things that actually was just reading as we were kind of researching, about Sims, he was just like a racist through and through, right? Like he
Oh,
thought,
obviously. Yes.
he thought blacks were less intelligent than white people. He even did experiments and surgical treatments on black children.
Oh, that one I feel like I did not know.
I
Oh,
I was just I literally am looking at it right now in front of
I
me.
didn't know that one. Oh,
It
mm-mm.
was like an enslaved black children, um, and it's just like, I mean, I would read one of the lines here, and this is from history.com, so you know where I'm getting my my information from. He said, he would operate on African American children using a shoemaker's tool to pry their bones apart and loosen their skulls.
And
So
these children alive?
I don't know. It doesn't say here.
Oh,
Because he was trying to test surgical treatments on enslaved children, effort to treat neonatal tetanus with little to no success. And this is where he thought that African Americans were less intelligent than white people and thought it was because their skulls grew too quickly around their brain. Just terrible. So even just knowing that there was no limit to this man's just disgustingness of things and just thinking of it, and doing that, what he did to black women and just black people,
Mm-hmm.
black enslaved people, individuals, is just, it's terrible. And to even fathom, to even applaud him or give him the title of father of modern gynecology. I was
I
telling
don't know who
Martina,
the fuck did that. Honestly, I want to know who decided he was the father of modern gynecology. I really do.
because I'm like, I told Martina right before we started recording, like, I can't even refer to him as father of anything.
I know you used to like. I don't even want to say father. I don't blame you because he's not a father of nothing. He's a father of assholes. He can be that. That's what he can be.
And then to think of what he did to women, to black women, um, you know, with no anesthesia, the pain that those women had to go through and endure in the name of medical progress, and to know that this man thought of them as less intelligent. I know he, at the time, people, there, people thought that blacks felt either less or no pain,
Mm-hmm.
which is ridiculous
That's
because
bullshit.
we all
We all feel pain.
feel pain. We all have the same organs, the same,
Mm-hmm.
like everything is the same. There's nothing different really,
Yep.
from that perspective medically. And it's like, man, and just to know that that happened, and people really gave him the name of, like, oh, he is the father of this, and he did this with, obviously, probably, nobody really referenced how, at the time. They're like, well, figured this out, and did this and that, and and history has a way of just whitewashing it all and just being like, oh, everything was done, whatever. But as we, even when you look at, when you think about the episode we did last week, Martina, with Henrietta Lacks, of like,
I put
oh,
it in the section. I gotta let Phoebe out.
okay, go for it. We will come on. This is live, people. Phoebe is Martina's cat.
Yes.
For those that don't know.
Those who don't know, I'm back. It's always lively here with perspective. Okay,
All right.
continue your very important conversation.
Yeah, no, it was just referencing, our last week episode with Alex, and how, Johns Hopkins was kind of justifying how, like, in the 1950s, you didn't really need consent. It was
Mhm.
legal and acceptable to just take her cells and use them for whatever. And it's like, that's the same reason that a lot of people have used, in historically, right? Like,
And did they apologize? I'm sorry. Did like John Hopkins apologize in any of that material you were reading? Did they say that they were sorry?
I have to go back. I think
Okay.
I'll have to go back. I think they did, but I'll have to go back and do that, and we'll make sure. I think we'll make sure to make sure all of that is linked as
Yeah.
well. Here, so you all can go read it too, or listeners, you can read it, and look into it too. But when you think about, it's not just Johns Hopkins. It's historically, people don't ask permission, particularly when it's anyone that isn't white, right? Like, if you're not considered white, you're probably seen as less than, and we're
Mm-hmm.
just, because whiteness is obviously superior and always thinks of them as like, oh, well, we can just take whatever we want, because that's the colonizer mentality. We can take without having to really provide any reasoning, because it's our destiny, it's our right, whatever you want to call it. And this is what this man Sims did. He's just like, well, I want to figure something out, so I'm just going to use these black women and do it. And it's frustrating, just as a woman, to know that another woman suffered, um in the most horrible of ways,
Yeah.
and just in one of the most, like, intimate places, right? Like, that's such an intimate place for a woman, and
Yes.
to be just poked and prodded and made to suffer just to figure things out, because they thought that you didn't really feel any pain, so why would it matter? It's it makes me hurt. Like I'm like it makes it
Physically, it
hurt.
makes
Like
it physically
like
makes it hurt. Yeah.
it's just like, man, I can imagine a little bit because if you are a woman listening, you know what it means to go into your annual pap smear or every other year, however how depends on how
Ever
old you
often,
are.
yes.
Um, but we know that it is not fun.
If you've given birth, if you
Yes.
had any sort of, if you had even if you have a mammogram, that's not fun. Even if you don't get a mammogram, I mean, you have your breast examined, they
Pushed.
they push down,
It
especially,
hurts. It's
cervical cancer, which is what Henrietta Lacks had. That was not enjoyable. These are not painful things. I mean, these are very painful things that are happening to you. And the fact, it almost makes me think that Sims, even if he did believe that Black people or Black women did experience pain the same, he still would have proceeded. He, I think he still would have carried it out. It didn't matter
cared
because
about
he didn't see you as
most
human.
men in that area, probably at that era, didn't care about
He didn't care.
obviously that sentiment still existed today.
Amen.
Um,
Unfortunately, yep.
unfortunately. So I agree with you. I think even if he did believe that they felt pain, and I think if even if Black women weren't there at that time,
Mhm.
just women, just if it was a woman, he would have proceeded.
Yeah.
It just would have been because obviously women have been considered less than for a very long time.
Hmm. Yep. And yeah, and like we're saying, I think these are things that we're still discussing. I mean, this was the mid 1800s. Jesus Christ, this was so we're hundreds of years, later. I think if my math is mathing, but we are quite
Don't
some
let us
time
know
into the
if our
future.
math is mathing.
Yeah, we are in 2022, and so the fact that, again, to me, it's not shocking, but it still kind of takes my breath away that we're still having these discussions, and we still know. I mean, I know you and I talked about, even just if you are a plus size woman, going to the doctor is not enjoyable because doctors always blame almost every damn ailment on,
Everything.
have you lost weight, have you tried to lose weight?
I have a toothache.
Yeah, I have a toothache. I have an eye infection.
Eating
Oh, is
less.
that because you ate too much stuff? So it's like, even things that are not necessarily a part of, like, gynecology, it's still a disparity that women who are larger often experience, and that can be across the board. You can be white, you can be whatever, in terms of that. It's still something, I think, that women who are larger go through and experience. But yeah, I think you look back at now the fact that I mean, just looking at childbirth in general, to me, just seems like one of the most painful things that a woman can ever endure. And the fact that we have health professionals in this day and age who still don't take women seriously when it comes to how they're feeling. It's, even mental health. For the longest time, they called it hysteria because they thought women were just losing their mind. They want attention. No, these women were actually going through something, and it's just, to me, it's just, in many ways, it's still, they may not call it out so bluntly nowadays, but there's a lot of ways that medical professionals and healthcare professionals do still call it out. And don't think people are not aware of it. I mean, I think from both of us who have worked in maternal child health, different areas, and know different people in that field, it's still very present. It's very evident. It hasn't gone away completely.
No, it hasn't. And I'm reading a little bit of sort of the names of they have three names that from his records. Um, Lucy, Betsy, and I don't know if it's Anarcha or Anarcha because it's Anarcha. And those are their names. Like those are
I have heard, I think, Lucy and Betsy. I have not heard of the third woman, but I had heard of the first two.
Anarcha is actually the one that she was a 17-year-old enslaved woman who he perfected his method for that fistula surgeries after 4 years of experimentation.
And I just wonder how many women lost their lives because of this. Like, I'm not sure if these three women were a part of the ones who lost their lives from some of these horrible experiments, but just, think about the children you just said too. Like, I just wonder how many people lost their lives because you were trying to perfect gynecology. And to me, you know what? This probably gonna sound a little gender biased, but I always wonder why are men are in the field of gynecology. I'm sorry, I had to say it. I mean, I personally, I have a female gynecologist, and to me, the fact that men are in that field, but then again, medicine is a male dominated field, and it also means they dominate or want to dominate women's bodies. And everyone has their preferences, but I have never really felt comfortable having a male gynecologist. But I know people who do. It's everybody has their preference, to each their own. But I've always wondered about that. Like, what makes a man want to go into gynecology of all the other specialties in medicine, especially nowadays? Maybe back then when they didn't have women in the field who were in gynecology, okay, but they didn't have any other option. But nowadays, there are tens of different specialties that you can do. And it's fascinating to me. And if you are a male gynecologist and you're listening or watching this, I would love to know. I really would. Like, what propelled you to go into this field? Like, I mean, to go into this specialty of medicine as opposed to going into something else. That's just.
And maybe that's an episode for us to explore. Let us
Perhaps,
know in the
yeah.
comments if you're interested in kind of us maybe having a conversation with some male gynecologists of what drove them to the field. Because like to your point, I definitely feel much more comfortable having a female gynecologist than I would a male. And I just, it's just the way it is. I mean, I don't, it's my comfort level.
It's your comfort. And like you said, it's such an intimate thing. Like, I mean, I think being in medicine in general is a very intimate experience anyway, whether you are a gynecologist or you're a family doctor. It's people are allowing you into their lives and they're exposing themselves both physically and mentally so you can help them be better. And I just think, like, especially for gynecology, it's something so personal. Because most of the time you are, naked. You have, just the little robe or sheet thing that they may give you. Like if you're getting a breast exam or you're getting a pap smear, you got to take all your clothes off. And for a lot of people, that's not necessarily comfortable. And so, I'm just really intrigued. And like you said, maybe that's an episode or a series, but I'm really interested, even if you're not a male gynecologist yourself, but if you have friends or someone I would love that insight, really, just to know, how did you end up in this field of all the fields? How did you end up in gynecology?
Yeah, put a like or a comment or something of just if this is something that would be interested you as a listener to kind of for us to dig into and sort of have those conversations, because it'd be I want to have that conversation and kind of learn about it, because a lot of, I think one of the things that I was telling Martina offline before we started recording is even the sort of the ramifications of what Sims did, in the mid 1800s, and what it means to our modern day, going to the gynecologist, getting these tests and these, things done, like the pap smear. For me, it's painful. Like, it hurts. And to have heard a lot of people think, to have heard that it's out there that, that our, the cervix doesn't have nerve endings, or that we don't feel pain, or that it's not painful. And that there are, real doctors out here who believe that and who that, it's definitely a remnant of what was done, right? Because, we had Black women who were experimented on, who were not used anesthesia or anything, and because they survived, and I think it's more for Black women, I think that's even much more probably prominent. It probably happens more with Black women, and probably with Latinas and others that are not white in the United States, and are considered white. Their voices are probably uh listened less to. Their pain is probably just ignored and dismissed. Like I'm someone who had to had a cervical biopsy, and I don't care how much y'all told me, the doctors,
Yeah,
every
that
doctor
hurt.
told me it's just gonna be like a pinch. It's gonna be a pinch. You
You're
just
like,
take some
ooh,
ibuprofen beforehand. You know, you'll just feel it and then you'll be good. And ma'am, no, it was not a pinch. It
it was
hurt.
not.
The pain was there even with me taking ibuprofen beforehand. It hurt. And y'all just wanted to send me back to work or wherever, like nothing happened. Like I just didn't get a piece of me ripped out. Like no. Like and it makes me think to how it started, right? Like this this was started by this racist
Mm,
man
mm-mm.
who believed that these women felt no pain, who did not care. I mean, and there's records of him like saying like, oh, they were screaming in agony, they were like all these things, and it's like, yet you continued with your experiments because you thought they had no pain, and it's there's still remnants of that in even our modern day gynecology and in our and there's stories of women who have said like my doctor dismissed my pain, I fainted during the procedure or like all these things and I blacked out or even when you think about I've heard women share about like when they got their IUDs inserted and that was
Oh, that's,
painful
yes, I've heard that's a painful one. Yes.
and I'm like then yes, the health disparity, even if we just look at women, it started back there. Like it started with Sims, and that's continued on to this day. And you see it play out with Black women. We know maternal health,
Yep.
and sort of the rates of that and deaths, uh, with with childbirth with Black women is high. It's the higher, uh, in that sense, and it's like man, like we can't. How do we get past this? How do we make this better? And I'll say it once again, like you have to get rid of these racist policies. You have to look at how you're educating these medical professionals. What are you teaching?
What the hell are you teaching these people? And the fact that this is still happening, and not to cut you off, go ahead what you were saying, but it's I just like it is. There also in the timeline, there's one that um, talks about. I think this is medical students and residents in
Yep.
2016. I think at the University of Virginia. Um, they thought that blacks could endure pain more
Mhm.
than whites, and this is 2016.
Yeah.
We have these students going out into the world and believing that. And
White
when the
medical students.
medical students, okay,
Right.
okay, going out into the world with this knowledge, like what the hell? And I think um, it just really kind of made me again. It's not shocking. I mean, yes, I think it is. It's shocking, but not a surprise. And a few years ago, I can't remember the exact report that came out that basically said what you said. Black women were dying at a higher rate than their white counterparts in childbirth or just with maternal health issues in general. And people were so surprised. I think white folks were surprised, maybe white professionals and different institutions that are white led were so surprised by this. And I mean, from that, you've gotten a lot of MCH task force, how I feel about task force have come out and all these sort of things that have happened because of that in like New York City, here in Chicago, I'm sure LA, a lot of the major cities where we saw some of these really dire numbers. And the thing is, to me, it's like, why are you surprised?
Yeah.
Why are you surprised when we're still operating in these systemic systems? I don't understand. Do you think these are systems that are created for Black and Brown women to thrive and actually give birth healthy children, have a healthy birth? Why do you think those numbers are so high? And it's always so fascinating to me that it takes those sort of situations for people to wake up, kind of like what we said about 2020 and COVID. It had to take something so dire that's killed a lot of people, a lot of women. And now people are waking up and being like, oh, well, we got to get a task force to this. What are we going to do? Yeah, task force is great and all, but that's not changing the issue. You're not changing what's really happening because we still have medical students who think that Black people don't experience pain or don't experience pain as much as white people. Like until we get that aligned, we're gonna again we keep running the same cycle. It's the same thing.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it goes back to sort of you pinpoint it back to Sims, like it started there and it continued
Mm-hmm.
on that same thinking, particularly around obviously white people, because I know that Mexicans and Venezuelans and others experience pain. I know Black people experience pain because that's the truth. Like
Right.
that's never been like there's never someone where like, oh, they don't really feel pain or they have differently, like that's never crossed my mind to think that nobody
Never.
experienced the same pain or anything. And it's like, but with white people,
Again, it's
it's
that disconnect. They don't
it's so ingrained.
so ingrained with them.
It's ingrained because it's been since our country started, since slavery was brought into this country,
Mhm.
really. Since slavery was brought in, yet Black people being brought, African people were brought to this, country. That that's where it began. You had to dehumanize the individual in order to enslave them. Like you just had to just take all humanity away in order to do that. And I think that's you have those remnants of it to today, to the modern day, because it's so ingrained.
It's
The
so ingrained. Yeah.
like it's and it's not acknowledged by the white
Mm-mm. It's
institution.
acknowledged when they acknowledge, like when they want to finally acknowledge it. Like,
Yeah,
oh my goodness, this is
when it's time for them to acknowledge it, when they
right.
feel it's time for them to acknowledge it, when it's time for them to like whoever them is, like whatever it is, like
Whatever the issue is.
like it's like, oh, okay, okay, now we can acknowledge it, or now we can try to make it right, whatever that means.
Yeah, whatever that means. And
And it's just it's ingrained. Like like I know I've had conversation with white people where they can't grasp the concept of white privilege.
that's so yeah.
And it's like I sometimes I give up and I'm like, nah, I'm tired, right? But I think because these things are so ingrained into their their world, because I feel sometimes that a lot of white people, particularly in this country, live in a very different world than the
Oh,
rest.
absolutely they do. Absolutely.
Like, they're in a different universe.
Absolutely. Amen. Amen. And they don't realize that. Well, you know what? They might realize that, but they don't want to be aware of that because I think white people they want to keep operating the way they are because for them their life is going just fine. For all intents and purposes, it's not everybody, but their life's going just fine. So they don't have to be aware of anybody else. But you and I are so aware because we live this life. We were born, and you were born Mexican. I was born Black. Like I was born in the South. You born in Chicago, and on the South side. So it's like we can't help it because this is the life that we lead. They don't have to live their life, and I think for them, again, that's always so interesting to me. The white people who don't recognize their own privilege
Yeah.
because they have the privilege to not have to recognize it. and
And it's because I think um white American society has done such a good job of equating privilege to money,
mm-hmm.
that it's like, well, you have white people who are like, well, I didn't have money growing up. I didn't have this. I was like, your white privilege has nothing to do with money.
Mm-mm.
If you are white and poor in this country, you still have white privilege.
Yeah.
And it goes to like, if you are a white male and you go into a doctor's office, sticking to sort of the topic of our today's episode, you're most like your pain is going to be believed. They're going to run the tests that they need to run. They're going to do whatever they can to ensure that your pain, whatever is causing your ailment, is going to be found. Now, if you are a woman, particularly if you're a woman of color, and you go into it, they're going to chalk it up to like, well, maybe you're stressed, maybe
Yeah.
maybe
Okay.
you gotta just change your diet, you know, has something like all these like all these things are going to be asked of you before they probably won't even like run a test, and if they do, they're going to run just your basic blood work.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, we're just going to run your basic blood, see if there's anything off, and that's it. And you know, and then you because and then if you are a white woman, you're more likely they're probably going to do some extra tests for you. They're probably going to believe you a lot more quickly about your pain or what's
Definitely.
ailing you. They're going to do like, and that's a privilege.
Yep.
That's a privilege that you're not going. They're not going to assume something about you. They're not going to be like, well, it's your diet because you know you're Latina. You're probably eating all these like tacos, or you're Mexican.
Mm-hmm.
Not all Latinos eat tacos, so I'm not gonna say that. But like you're Mexican, you're probably eating
Some
tacos,
white people do though. Some white people do.
and you're eating fried this, or you're eating tortillas all the time. Like all these things that maybe contribute to you feeling this way, or you're stressed or whatever. Like all these things that these notions of what they think might be contributing to whatever they but they'll never sit down and be like, oh my god, what can we do to just make it better? Because I've been there where
Yeah.
it's like, and I think then you add in that I'm a fat Latina coming in here, and now everything is just my weight. Like
Everything's about the way.
everything's about your weight. Like, well, you know, my knee hurts, and they're like, well, maybe you should consider losing some
Lose
weight.
some weight because you got too much on you. You should
I
lose.
was like, okay, but what am I gonna do about the pain?
What about the pain though?
Like
You know?
I'm not gonna lose, you know,
Oh,
50
I have a
pounds
complete
by
tangent.
tomorrow.
I, I have a complete tangent. But
Let's
okay,
go. Let's go
you
with it.
talking about and okay, y'all, and we're gonna wrap it up in a bit because I think we about two at a time. I just gotta say this tangent. So you're talking about the pain in your knee if you came in for an example. And the thing is, if this is a white person, particularly a white male, he would get the medicine. He probably would get those oxys or get whatever these high potent oxy
Whatever, cortisone shot,
opioid.
whatever.
Yeah, these high powered drugs. And you know, the thing that really pisses me off about this, because white people have gotten access to these sort of drugs, it's now a crisis. Like we have an opioid crisis. But when this was affecting Black people or brown folks, because I mean, of course, we had the crack epidemic in the 80s. When that was killing Black people left and right, we don't care.
Yeah.
But we got opioids that are killing white housewives, and white men. It's oh God, it's a whole epidemic. We got to find a way to stop it. Why? All of a sudden, opioids were okay to kill everybody else. So because it's killing white people, now we got to find a way to regulate painkillers when they're actually people who really do need it, who can't get it now because white people have decided they want to overdose on it and die from it. That was my tangent, but that just pissed me off because I know because I think there's a show or a movie or something that's on Hulu. I can't think of the name of it. And it's about the opioid epidemic. Mm-hmm. And who are they focusing on? They're focusing on how it's affected white people.
Yeah.
But they're not the only fucking ones, you know? And it's just kind of what you were saying about that, how it's so difficult for people of color to just get the simple medical attention that they need at times because they think, oh, you're gonna misuse something, you're gonna overdose on something, or like you said, oh, well, you're fine, you know, maybe you should lose weight, maybe you should, you know, do this or something to be less stressed. No, not necessarily. No, not really. No. And so I just had to throw that in because that particularly is getting on my nerves. That has been getting on my nerves.
I don't even think that's much of a tangent because I think it just goes to show the biases, right, and the disparities that continue to exist to this day. Like you said, like it isn't until it starts impacting white people that then it garners attention.
Mm-hmm.
Then it garners like we got to look into it because I'm fairly sure that I heard. I was probably listening to NPR or something, and they were talking about how the manufacturers of the opioids and all that were being sued and they were being held accountable. But that only came up to be because you ended up having white people having this epidemic being impacted, and I think that's the reality of the health disparities and how race plays a role in it, and how the biases play a role, because when you are anything other than white in this country, unfortunately, you are thought of as less than.
Yep.
You are thought of as someone who, you know, like you said, like you're a crack addict. You're gonna, or you're eating bad all the time. Like I don't understand why our food is seen as unhealthy,
Mm-hmm.
and unseasoned food.
It is unseasoned. Listen, I ain't trying to make
I'm
no.
sorry, y'all, but it's not seasoned
It's
properly.
not, and don't get me wrong. Listen, sometimes I just like a boiled egg with salt and pepper. There's nothing wrong. There's salt and pepper has its moments, but I'm sorry. For the most part, I do like my food, but a little bit more than salt and pepper. Okay, and yes, now we'll say, now should you be eating 3 or 4 slices of pecan pie? If you want to do it, that's your business. But if you're going to do it, you probably need to be more active. But that does not mean that that's necessarily bad for you, because it's a pecan pie, and that's something that Black people like to eat. Well, you don't need to eat this, that.
Don't base your medical diagnoses or anything off of what you think of what a person is eating.
Yeah.
Because for all you know, I might be eating salads, grilled chicken, all these things, and there's something wrong with me that's not allowing me to lose weight. And because you can't see past that, you can't see past my skin color, whatever my name is, whatever triggers you to think that I am anything other than white, you can't see past it. So you're just gonna assume something, and it's like, it has nothing to do with my diet. Maybe I'm working out 3 days a week and all these things. And there are people who don't get diagnosed correctly for so long because doctors don't believe them or make assumptions of what they're doing and don't run the proper tests.
Don't do it.
And I think it's so unfortunate, because you have these ideas of what our diets are or what they're not, and how, the American diet, of healthy diet is salads and these things. And it's like, it's not that. Like, let's decolonize all of that, because no, that ain't it for me. Like,
there's a good book out there called Decolonize Our Diet. As a really good friend of mine recommended for me. And I think it focuses around Latin American cuisine. And I may be wrong about that, but it tells you how to eat food and like how to interpret the food that you're eating. I've not read it, but it's on my list, but it's a good one.
I'm gonna look into that one.
Yeah.
I think there's so much about the history, obviously colonization, what that did to our countries here in North and South America, and then the impact of what the slavery and all that. Like, all of that has impacted just health in general, and what we know about it. And yeah, I definitely think in the future, talking about just food and how ethnic or cultural,
however they want to say it.
Yeah, do, like, how it's healthy or not healthy. It's such an important conversation to have, because of why America believes to be healthy, or what America has deemed healthy, isn't the end all to be all, right? Like, that's not it. It's not the only way. And there are healthy foods in all of our cultures. Like, we all, like, all of it is healthy and can be healthy.
I was gonna say, even I know nutritionists now, they are trying to get away from that term healthy and unhealthy, because it has a negative connotation to it. If you talk about certain foods, it's a negative. And yeah, like maybe eating a whole bag of chips, you probably shouldn't do that in one sitting. Don't mean you can't have chips. Why is that a negative food? And it's the way people have put labels on what's negative and what's not negative. And the thing is about, I always say it's like eating things in moderation. You can eat whatever you want. I remember Tyra Banks said this years ago. I remember, because of course she's like one of the first, well, she's a very, well-known Black supermodel, and she's built differently because she's a Black woman. And she was always saying, you're like, you can eat whatever you want in moderation. There's nothing wrong with that. And I think people just have this thing where you can't eat that and you can't eat this because you're gonna, do whatever. And so I just think, yeah, I think that could be something that we could do a series on, or if people are interested and want to know more about that, of course, comment and let us know. So,
Yeah. But yeah, I think this is just a great spot to kind of start wrapping up and kind of closing out. But I think just in general for me, thinking about today's conversation around like health disparity and the historical, right, like the history of where it began and how it still continues to impact today, or how it's still in our systems today. I think it's sad, it's frustrating, it's maddening as a woman of color to go to a doctor and know that there may be these preconceived notions
mm-hmm.
Of of what they think about me, and particularly because there isn't a lot of doctors that look like me, that I might go see,
Yeah.
especially when you start getting into specialists, right? When you
Yes.
start getting into the specialist area, maybe if you're going to your primary care doctor, you might find a few more that look like you, but when you start getting into specialties, you don't always find the cardiologists and all these others that can treat you or understand you culturally, and and sort of treat you in that way. But I think it's just a conversation I think we'll continue to have. I think we'll continue to have it. We'll still uh, until we break down those systems, we'll just continue that. But I'll kind of let you also share your kind of final thoughts about today's conversation.
No, I think this is definitely like the beginning parts of conversations. And I think, we've tried to talk about a lot of stuff in this series, and coming up next week, we're going to be doing a whole wrap up of, kind of the entire series. But obviously, as we mentioned, there's so much more to this. We've spent, I know, a lot of this episode talking about, women in healthcare. And it's also something that we're interested in continuing, having another series or discussion around um, women in healthcare, whether it's women of color who are physicians, or women of color who are nurses, who are in administrative, talking more about the maternal child health elements and how that affects women of color, and so much more. And so I think, again, I just want to say we are shattering the veil here, but there's so much more to shatter. There's a lot more conversations that we need to have, because there's a lot of systems that need an entire overhaul, and people are afraid of that because they don't know what's going to take the place of that. But there are things, a lot of good things that could take the place, and where we need to be more inclusive, where we have not been traditionally in these areas. And so really, I would say just kind of stay tuned. We always try to have a good time on here. We talk about a lot of serious stuff, but we always try to bring some sort of levity to it. And we want you all to be a part of the conversation. So please comment, reach out to us on Instagram, post, ask questions, DM us, give us recommendations of what you want to hear, maybe books or articles, things that we could read. We're always open to that. Just please be respectful. That's all we say. But on that, I think we can wrap this on up. And until next time, you all have a good evening, good day, wherever you're at. So talk to y'all later.